Hello grown-ups and welcome to this week's episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up with me, your host Sam Cooper-Gray. We have made it to episode 50, so firstly a massive thank you to everyone who has listened and been on that journey with us and listened to the 49 people we've had so far as guests. As I promised I would at episode 50, I have agreed to be interviewed this week. So join us this week as the brilliant Tamara Gillen, who was my first guest, so we've had a lovely full circle, interviews me about my views on being a grown-up. What would she recognise? I think she would recognise an inability to do what she was told. I think do you know what? The thing I wish I'd known when I was younger is stop worrying about what other people think about you, because to be honest they are so busy worrying about themselves they just couldn't give a shit about what you're doing. So when I was working at the fruit and veg place, I got a phone call from my mum saying, don't worry, but I've got cancer. I was like, thanks mum.
Here we are, full circle moment. I was your first guest and now I get to put you in the hot seat.
So I'm really not looking forward to.
It doesn't feel natural, does it?
It's very odd.
But we cannot wait to hear your story, because I know it's quite a story. So, and I know you've had quite an adventure, but tell me about your journey into adulthood.
Okay, so I was born in the north of Scotland, which obviously the accent doesn't give away.
I don't believe you.
No, I know. And my dad was in the Fleet Air Arm, so we moved around a lot as kids. And then my parents got divorced when I was quite young, and we moved again around a bit and then to London. So I spent my formative years growing up in London with my mum and my sister and then my stepdad.
Do you think that the moving around created a certain you or certain qualities of you?
Yeah, I think I move a lot. Like I'm really good at packing. So yes, I think it did. I think I'm very comfortable moving. I think some people, if they grow up in that environment, then really want to be in one place. Whereas for me, it's meant as long as I've got my stuff around me, I'm home. So as long as I can feel at home anywhere. So I have moved a lot in my life. I have a very low boredom threshold. So I think I'm on house, I worked it out the other day, I think I'm on house 29.
I think that's possibly a record.
Yeah, it's not bad.
That's a lot. I think it's interesting because I moved around a lot as a child between the UK and New Zealand as my parents decided where to settle. But it does mean that you can make home in different places and settle quite quickly. Yeah. But from your formative years in London, where next? What happened next?
Grew up in South London and I think had a freedom that A, you don't get in the countryside, and B, you probably don't get now. So, you know, had a bus pass from the age of 11, walked to school on my own from the age of, 6 or 7. So was always a pretty independent kid. Worked most of my teenage years as well. I think I had my first paper round, I think I couldn't have been more than 10 or 11 because I wanted to earn my own money. And then worked through school and then went off to university in Kent. Wanted to be close enough to home to come home from a washing, but far enough that my parents wouldn't just turn up.
Couldn't just pop in.
Which was a good idea until I was away in Ibiza celebrating my A-levels and I rang home to tell my mum I was still alive, and she was like, oh, by the way, we moved to Manchester. No, so that was not in the plan. So that being close to home didn't really work, so they moved up north and I moved to Kent.
And you're still there in Kent?
I'm back, yes. So I've moved around the country and lived all over the place over the years, but now back in Kent, actually, 20 minutes from the university I went to, and where my grandparents were in Kent as well. So yes, it feels like I've come home a little bit in the last few years.
But before coming home, you've been to all sorts. You've been to all sorts of places and worked all sorts of places. Tell us about some of the highlights of some of those moves, adventures and the things conquered.
So after university, worked. I used to sell peas for a living. That was my first graduate job, as you do.
I graded cherries.
Did you? Well, we went, it was, because Kent's obviously got lots of fruit and veg growing, Garden of England and all that. And I went and worked for this amazing little firm that used to sell to the supermarket. And I got a job as their weekend salesperson. So like Marks and Spencer's and Sainsbury's and Summerfield, showing my age, and Safeway would all ring over the weekend and say, I need this, I need that. And I'd make sure it was...
Were you a very good pea saleswoman?
I was quite good, yeah. I was quite good. I learned a lot very quickly. Then moved back to London to work for a wine company.
I like the swap. I think the swap out's quite good.
Well, do you know what? It's funny. I really enjoyed it. I worked for Majestic Wine as a graduate, It was the most terrible pay in the world. We worked really long hours. It gave me very expensive tasting wine, which is not good when you're 21. I absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed it. And I only did it for 6 months because I just couldn't afford to do it for any longer. But I learnt loads about wine. I learnt masses about running a team. You know, they put me in charge of a massive store, you know, 3 months in. So it was a brilliant experience. But yeah, I just couldn't afford to continue doing it. So then went off and worked for British Telecom, ran a call centre. Again, chucking yourself out there and learning and getting on the phones and selling and stuff. That was really interesting, but quite boring. And then got a graduate job. So applied to HSBC and applied 3 times before they gave me a graduate job.
Darn fools.
I think they just gave up. I think they just give the woman a job.
Yeah,
she's not going to go away.
Not going to go away until we get the job.
So yeah, and then joined HSBC and did various jobs, but did 25 years there. So yeah, had an amazing career with them and went all over the world.
Some amazing adventures, and now you get to do the next chapter.
Yes, yeah. So now the terrifying thing of leaving, taking redundancy, which I wanted, it was right for me, but is terrifying when you then, instead of going doing the sensible thing and getting another job, I've come out and started my own business. So doing what I love, working with female founders and other fabulous women. Yeah, working for yourself, as you know, is terrifying. So it's been, the last 6 months has probably been my steepest learning curve ever. Intermingled with all of that from a life perspective, I've had some curveballs thrown at me, as you know, which really, I think, has changed my attitude to the way that I work. I lost my mum in my early 20s. So when I was working at the fruit and veg place, I got a phone call from my mum saying, "Don't worry, but I've got cancer." I was like, "Thanks, Mum." And then she died when I was 24. So while my sister was heavily pregnant with her second daughter. So we were like, "Mum, are you okay? Asha, please don't give birth in the hospital. This hospital doesn't have a maternity unit." So we were like between the two, which was very bizarre. So yeah, I think that formed me quite a lot, because I think it's just something you just never expect to happen in your 20s.
Do you think that because I think, you know, that it taught you to navigate real tough times and rise, because the curveballs that you've faced have been quite tough, quite confronting, not things that happen every day, every year, every week. But do you think it's given you the strength to, because once you know I can get back up, that is also a strength in and of itself, as hard as it is to navigate?
I think it lowered my ability to deal with bullshit.
Great thing to not have to deal with.
Which, you know, later on got lowered even more. But I think I was already pretty resilient because I was always quite independent. You know, my mum really did teach both of us to be really independent women. Never occurred to either of us we couldn't do anything that we wanted to, because we were raised with the expectation and, you know, by a matriarchal family where, you know, just got on with it. If you wanted to do it, you were the only barrier. So I think it was really hard to go through young. But I think it's one of those things that you don't realise it's hard and it's different to other people's lived experience because you've only got your own lived experience. So for me, it was just one of those things that happened. And she was so poorly at the end. It was right for her. And so that kind of helps you rationalise what happened. And then you go, you know, you pick yourself up and you get on with it. Because what's the alternative?
What's the alternative? And you've gone on and done great things with it. And I also think one of the things I know about you is your empathy and understanding of how other people feel and what other people, I think, is something that is one of your true superpowers. You're strong, you're resilient, but you also get other people, you get what they go through and you stand with them. And I'm sure that that's something learned from those experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, I think I'm very aware of, because I didn't always tell people how I felt, that people can go through stuff and you not know unless you're paying real attention. And I am fiercely loyal. So if someone is in my camp, they're in my camp. You know, they're part of the family, and I will protect them to the hilt. And I think that is about, I learn to have my people around me. And I've got some amazing friends that I've grown up with that have been friends. You know, I can barely remember. You know, I live 400 metres from
Mm-hmm.
My best friend, who I've known since I was 11 years old, I met on the first day of secondary school. You know, and I'm knocking on 50 this year, and you know, we literally live down the road from each other and share each other's houses.
And dog.
And dogs, yeah, we share dogs as well.
And dog care.
And teenagers.
And
They're not mine,
yeah.
but I share them, yeah.
Which is, I think, a wonderful thing to have in your life. And
I'm so lucky. Yeah.
Well, as my dad says, you make your own luck, and you make your own luck by the loyalty you've given. And
True. Yeah, and because I don't have kids of my own, like you discover you collect godchildren when you don't have your own children. Someone's like, oh, you don't have kids, be a godparent, which I love because I've got, you know, amazing nieces and nephews and godchildren, and I get to have loads of younger people in my life without having to raise them, which is quite nice.
Which is wonderful. Thank you so much.
I just get to spoil them.
Thank you so much for coming on that adventure. Goodbye. Yeah. Goodbye. Love seeing you. Thanks so much. And you love great. Look, thinking of young people, what would you recognise in your 18-year-old self today?
God. What would she recognise? I think she would recognise an inability to do what she was told.
Right.
That definitely hasn't changed. I think I did one of those online quizzes once, and I think it was the female lead one actually, and it came back with the definition of me, which I think is probably the best one I've ever had, which is I'm a rebel. And it said something like, you will do the opposite of what someone tells you to do on principle, and that probably, like if someone says to me, you can't do that, like I am that kid who would get that look on their face, and I'm like, oh yeah, really?
I will be doing that.
You know, the best way to motivate me to do something, I don't think my parents ever worked this out though, which is quite funny, that the best way to motivate me to do anything is tell me I'm not capable of it. And then I'm just like, oh, so
I always wondered that at school, whether it was teachers had got the measure of me who also has a strong rebel gene and would say, I don't think you're going to do well in that. And I'd be like, right.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they're sitting there thinking, ha, I got you, or...
Yeah, I don't think my parents ever leveraged it to the best of their ability, to be honest, because I didn't study that hard. I found school quite boring. I found study quite boring. I think every school report I ever had says she has ants in her pants and she talks too much, because I needed interaction to learn, and so that definitely hasn't changed. So that was the same at 18 as it is now, which is I find very hard to sit still and to kind of do nothing or to really concentrate on one thing. I'm much better doing lots of different things. It makes me more productive.
As a fellow lover of multitasking, I'm with you all the way. What would surprise you or you'd be amazed by? You recognise the rebel lives on, but what would surprise you?
I think this is partly age and lived experience, is I have an inner confidence now. I was not a confident teenager. I had terrible acne. I was really self-conscious. It was typical teenage things. I wasn't big, but I thought I was. I was convinced, that everyone was judging me. And so I had very little, outwardly, I'd have come across probably as quite a confident, cocky kid. But I had very little kind of inner confidence in who I was and what I believed in. And over the last 32 years since then, I think because of the experience I've had, and I still have like such imposter syndrome, where sometimes I walk onto stages and I'm like, what am I doing here? But I can center myself to go, actually, no, you've spent 30 years doing this. Actually, you do know what you're doing. Whereas at 18, I just never felt I was good enough. And so I think she would be absolutely blown away by what I'm doing, where I am. I mean, for the listeners, Mara and I are currently sat in Australia on business, working out here, working with women who are amazing. Like, she'd have been like, what? I think she assumed I'd, she's have a good career and do well, but in quite a bland way. So I think that she'd have been like, what are you doing?
Bravo. And I think, I've known you for several years and I've seen you walk out on more stages, and each time you get a bit taller, and whether that's about the freedom of what you can talk about now that you're doing your own thing,
partly,
or
probably.
Just that belief in yourself that I can say what I strongly believe and I can say it straight, but the way you say it is with absolute confidence. So,
and I think I've stopped worrying. I was such a worrier, and I was so worried about what other people thought when I was younger. I just don't care anymore. And I think that is an age thing. I think especially for women, we get to that middle age, queen age status when you get into your mid-40s and 50s. I'm like, I don't have the energy to care about what other people think. And I can look myself in the mirror and know that I believe in what I'm doing and I think I'm a good person. And that brings a freedom that you just can't have at 18.
It sets you free.
Yeah.
It does set you free. What's one of the best decisions you've ever made?
I hate these questions, and it's my own fault because they're my own questions, aren't they? I'm not sure there's one best decision. There's a recency bias where I could say kind of leaving my big corporate job, but let's see how that works out because it's only been 6 months. I think the best decisions I've made are where I've made them with my gut. So I think there's been a number of them. Picking a job, I progressed quite quickly when I first joined the bank because I took the jobs outside of London and moved every 6 months to 2 years for the first 10 years of my career. And lots of my colleagues and friends wouldn't do that. They're like, I want to be in London, I want to be here, I want to be in this department. And if someone who I thought had my best interests at heart offered me a job, I took it. And I think that was a collection of best decisions because I got to do loads of different things. You know, I was a generalist, but I got to build a massive network, meet loads of people. So I think I've made a couple of really good decisions that have built into a best decision. And then probably the other one is letting a man I met on holiday come and stay at my house the weekend afterwards because he never left and I married him. So that was probably quite a good decision. Everyone's like, you've done what? I'm like, yeah.
There's hope. There's hope for romanticism is not dead in that story.
Well, yeah. Well, maybe now.
Maybe now. But sometimes you've got to go with your gut. I mean,
yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think one of the things I know as business is changing at pace, I say that generalists are really powerful people because roles are not defined in the way that they used to. They're going to continue to change at pace. So having general experiences, but ones that are centred around people development, management, networking, relationships are our superpowers. And I'm sure I know that is another one of your absolute superpowers.
Yeah, and I think the bonus of being a generalist is because you've been in lots of different situations, and you'll know this because when you run a business you have to firefight, is I can look at a situation, and I think doing years of strategy as well helps. Although I found strategy very frustrating because strategists kind of design stuff and don't deliver it, and I would like design it and be like, right, can we get on with it now? I want to now go do it. But I think what I have learned is an ability to look at any situation. I can have no knowledge of it, ask a couple of questions and have a really good idea of what the direction needs to be. And I couldn't have done that if I hadn't, gone and spent time up in Manchester, like doing debt approvals and running a team and, working in our retail business and standing in a branch on my feet for 10 hours. And without all of those completely disparate experiences. And then I went into a regional team and worked with 15 countries around Europe, and they all did things differently, and I had to talk to them all differently and had to get them all to agree to, without that, I couldn't do what I do now.
What do you think? Because I think for someone like you and someone like me, we're gut players. Yes. We feel the decision. There's a lot of rational decision making that goes into it, but our gut is very strong and we trust it. Any advice for people tapping into their gut to make a gut decision?
I think there's lots of science now around the real genuine scientific connection between the gut and the brain. So I think never underestimate, if your gut is saying something is good or bad, it probably is. Back it up. I've definitely been told in my career that sometimes I make gut decisions too quickly. I mean, they're normally right, but I do make them quite quickly and then I move on because that low attention span. But I think if you're not good with your gut, if you analyse everything, it creates procrastination. And, I'm a great believer in, perfection is the enemy of good enough, that actually if you're going in the general right direction, one step is better than no steps. So I think it's funny, isn't it? Because it's a really hard one to answer because when you know your gut, and I've trusted my gut more as I've got older, it's really hard to explain it because to us it's such a natural thing, which is I can look at a situation and pretty much know what I think quite quickly. My old boss used to call it processor speed. He was like, you just get stuff. And if you don't, you ask a question.
And as you say, you've got lots of experience in different circumstances that enables you to reach a decision or, quite quickly because you've got all of these lived experiences to fall back on and process them quite quickly.
And if not, people. I've built a really strong network of people where I can go, I have no idea, let me go and ask someone who does. And I think one of the biggest learns in my life is don't be afraid to ask questions.
Absolutely, and I ask any question. It's very interesting. I had I always used to have a mantra when I hired people was if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no.
Oh, I like it.
But over time, as I work with exec coaches, they said you just got to be really careful because that's good for hiring people that are like you.
Oh, yeah.
But you've got to find a way to identifying the people that are the opposite of you, because you need those.
Yeah, yeah.
And how do you identify those and make sure that you evaluate the hell yes in the different parameters? And I thought that was such a good learning for me.
And that is really true. And I think and what sits with that there is you will have a gut feel of whether or not someone fits from a culture perspective, and that's numero. But you're absolutely right. Recruiting people who are not like you makes you better.
100%.
It's just really hard.
It's so hard. It's so hard. What's the best advice that you paid absolutely no attention to?
This one's quite easy, actually. So early on in my career, I've always been an advocate for people who can't advocate for themselves, or been a voice. Like, I will always stand between someone else, and not danger as in a physical danger, but like I'll always stand up for the little guy who's getting picked on, because it's just who I am. And I've always been involved in kind of diversity and inclusion. And when I got a couple of years into working, sat on an inclusion board internally in our company, and one of my bosses, I asked him to do something, I can't remember what it was, and in a meeting full of people, and he just yelled at me across the desk. He was like, "This is going to be career limiting for you. I don't think you should spend time doing it." And I wasn't very, he's quite scary, but I wasn't very good at, as I say, like, that's fuel for me. So I did completely ignore him. And my reaction was, if that's true, I work for the wrong company. I think he was quite surprised by it. But I ignored it. It never occurred to me not to ignore it, by the way. There was no consideration. I was like, well, I don't care. I care about this. But actually, if I look over my career, that work I did outside of the day job on the things that I loved, now is the thing I do for a living. And so if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have had the connections, the network, that outside of the day job piece that I did probably influenced every job I took afterwards, because my network was built from there as much as it was from working. And so, I mean, it never occurred to me to take the advice, but I'm glad I ignored it.
And I think sometimes as well, I hear people talk about what's the career you want, how are you going to do it? And although I believe people should, it's your career, it's a path, don't let it happen to you. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the paths you don't take, or the wrong path that you take, lead you to the career that you never thought you'd have and experience. So it's sometimes you can go the wrong way, sometimes you could be told firmly to go the other way, but it's actually the journey gets you to where you are now.
I think you're right. And I think when it comes to careers, people think of a career as linear. And I remember someone saying to me once, don't think of your career as linear, think of it as snakes and ladders. And it was that was really good advice, because, I'd go and do a job, and then I'd take a sidestep to learn something new, or, I'd go off into a different department, or I'd go from working with retail customers into our corporate business, working in Europe or working overseas. And every time you're learning something. And I think if you know exactly what you want to do, a linear path is fine. I want to get here, and I know exactly where I'm going. Most people's careers and lives aren't like that. And so I think accepting that your life is going to go up and down, and you can take a side swipe and go off and do stuff, I think actually makes you more rounded as a human being, if nothing else.
Absolutely. I mean, as you know, I started to think by an accidental meeting when someone challenged me and said, I bet you can't unite the finance industry behind the needs of women. I was like, I bet I can.
This is why we get on, because we are so similar.
What is a personal challenge for listeners?
Personal challenge for listeners. I would say one of the things I'm fiercely independent, full stop, but I'm fiercely financially independent, possibly too much so, I appreciate that. But I think one of the challenges I would set to anybody is just knowing how to manage your money is actually more important than we think. And not because having money is important, but because it gives financial freedom, gives you the freedom to do the things you want to do. And so just thinking about and not running away from, understanding what you've got in your bank account and how to invest and things like that. And I think especially as women, we just don't seem to be taught it. And I think for anybody to understand just the basics of how money and investment work can fundamentally change your life. You know, if you put money aside from the age of 18, you know, one less night out drinking while you're at uni, in 30, 40 years' time, which you can't compute at that age, but the difference that makes to your life is humongous. So I think I always wanted to be financially independent, not because I wanted to earn lots of money, but because I wanted to be able to do whatever I liked.
And you know what? It's, you know, the number one driver of female well-being is financial confidence and feeling confident.
Yes.
And I was in a room the other day with 20 women, and again, I can ask this question of 100 women, and still it's between 20 to 30% are managing their money actively. That, you know, that is ridiculous. So it's a driver of confidence. It gives me freedom, comfort, all the things, but we're not doing it. And so I think that's a brilliant challenge to ask of people.
And I think also, if you look at the extreme of it as well, I do some work with Refuge, which is an amazing charity. They will tell you that one of the top reasons why women don't leave abusive partners is financial control, and they're trapped. And so losing that or not having it in the first place means you cannot get out if something does go wrong. And I think that's really important, and we just don't teach it. And actually, the rules are changing now in the UK. It's going into the curriculum in 2027 from primary school upwards to teach money, and it's so important.
So vitally important. It's a great challenge. And final piece of advice for the guide.
So, don't start a podcast because it's terrifying. Don't let people interview you. No, I think do you know what? The thing I wish I'd known when I was younger is stop worrying about what other people think about you. Because to be honest, they are so busy worrying about themselves, they just couldn't give a shit about what you're doing. And I think I was so consumed when I was younger about worrying what other people thought that it stopped me being my true me and held me back from going off and doing stuff. I wish I'd known that I'm not sure it would have changed me. I wouldn't have believed it when I was younger. That's the problem, isn't it? But I think just genuinely, if you think about how often you think about other people, you're so worried about yourself, you're not thinking about others, and everybody else is the same. And I think the earlier in life we learn that, the easier it is.
I think you said it, I think midlife, that's one of the things I love, is that I feel I'm finally coming into confidence of myself, which is ridiculous because we've both done many, many things. And it takes to midlife that you just think, this is me, I know who I am. And then I also think that thing, you know, of people being so scared when people are introducing themselves in a room and it's coming to them, and what are they going to say about them? They're not able to listen to what other people are saying because you're so worried about how. And so I think that is a thing to set people free.
And actually, I'm going to add another one in as well, because I think that's really important. One of the things I had an amazing business coach, because I had some time to prepare to leave my big corporate job. I was really quite scared that I didn't know who I was without the job title. So a couple of years ago, I took a sabbatical. It was like my test of the water of whether or not I could cope.
It was awful when you were gone.
Not for me, it was lovely. And I was really surprised how quickly I didn't feel the need to identify with it. But I did also know going on sabbatical and having a job to go back to was very different to just dropping off a cliff, taking redundancy, because I'd worked there for more than half my life. So I got a business coach. And one of the things I learned was to have an identity outside of my corporate being. Part of the reason I started the podcast while I still work there is I needed something that wasn't attached to my job title. And I think when you walk in a room and you meet people, it's so easy to be your job title as opposed to just be you. And that was a learn for me. Even now I've left and people, you introduce yourself and you're like, oh, I run a business, so I do this, as opposed to, hi, I'm Sam. And I think we need to know who we are without the accoutrements that sit around us. And if you can sit in that, then it gives you a freedom that I don't think you can understand until you've done it. And I was very, I would say lucky, planned, got an amazing business coach who's actually been on the podcast, she's been a guest. And she really helped me work out what I actually wanted while I was still in my job. So I didn't drop off a cliff when I left. And so it made that transition much easier than it could have been.
I loved that you planned to do it exactly how it should be done, but then how you've used your voice to tell the stories of so many other women. And it's been an absolute privilege to be asked to start the story and finish the story, and to have a chance to interview you and hear some of yours. And I have absolutely no doubt it's only just beginning. The next stage of your adventure is going to be even more fabulous.
Amazing, thank you. And as you know, and we'll share with the listeners, this is actually the last episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. For now, I'm sure I will come back to it because we are starting a new podcast, which is coming out on the 13th of April, called Women Are Good Business, because I did realise out of the 50 people who've been interviewed for my podcast, 48 of them are women. And like the two men I interviewed, I absolutely love. They both work in the inclusion space, unsurprisingly. But, and as you know, Think, the amazing Think, and you are sponsoring the new podcast. So we will have lots of new women to talk to and listen to and learn their stories. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. We have had such an amazing journey in our first 50 episodes. We're actually going to take a little bit of pause for a couple of months because we have an exciting new project coming, which I'll tell you about over the next couple of weeks, but watch this space. Please do go back and listen to the first 49 episodes and the amazing men and women that we've interviewed and the stories that they've told us. And we might even have a few more surprises coming your way. But in the meantime, enjoy being a grown-up.